Welcome to First Light Spotlight, Corrupted Archives. I'm writer, critic and editor Laura Robertson, and I'll be your host this evening. We'll be discussing the glitch aesthetic as an intervention in photography, and specifically its potential as a visual metaphor for the fractures and ruptures to family life caused by addiction, disorder, or trauma. Before we get going and I introduce the programme and our speakers, just a bit of housekeeping. So we've enabled the chat function, so please do comment throughout the event. This is a safe space and we ask that you're respectful to us and all other attendees. We've also enabled the Q&A box, so please do ask any of us questions and we'll answer at the end. So, to First Light, an inaugural photography project that celebrates the Northern graduates of 2020. Created by Waterside Trafford and Open Eye Gallery, First Light is a mentoring scheme. It's an exhibition at Castlefield Gallery's new art spaces in Warrington, as well as a publication of interdisciplinary writing, edited by yours truly. Plus, of course, this series of Spotlight Talks, which really aims to reflect the diversity of photography now, as practiced today, at a time when, arguably, we should all be reimagining our futures. So my guests tonight, Chanel Francine. Hi, Chanel.
Hi, Laura. Thanks for having me.
Who graduated last year from BA Photography at UCEN Manchester. Chanel is a creative media and visual communication photographer and winner of the Academic Achievement Award. Her photo montage series, Isolation Relations, is formed in part by donated family albums, which we'll be talking about in depth tonight. And she is currently working towards an MA later this year. Eleanor Woodley. Hi, Eleanor.
Hey.
Sorry. Eleanor graduated from the University of Salford's BA Fine Art programme last year and has written a new text in response to Chanel's work, which I'm delighted to say she'll be reading for us later. Eleanor is a researcher and writer exploring topics related to art, technology, and science through a neurodivergent lens. Coming from an art background, she now weaves research and creativity together in her writing, in the same way that she wove electrical wire into her sculptures. And last but not least, Andrew Mosley. Hi, Andrew.
Hey, everyone.
Who nominated Chanel for First Light. He is a curator, writer and educator whose career spans galleries, public spaces and festivals, including Manchester Art Gallery, FACT Liverpool, SciFest Italy and Format International Photography Festival. His writing appears in a wide range of publications and he has lectured on art in education across Europe. Andrew is Programme Director of Photography at UCEN Manchester, where he designed and delivered the new BA in partnership with Open Eye Gallery. Welcome, everyone. So, Chanel, I'd love to start with you. Congratulations, first off, on graduating during lockdown.
Oh, thank you.
Your final major project, Isolation Relations, which will be exhibited, of course, in Warrington from May.
That's
very
great.
exciting.
Very.
Well, it manages to tell a very relatable story, Chanel, of pathos and pain and vulnerability, I thought. So I was really interested to learn how the project really came together for you. What started it?
It's quite simple, really. I'm from quite a creative family, so we've always been involved in quite creative projects and musicians, actors. And to be fair, it really stemmed from early childhood when my mum, she was like the first person to ever put a camera in my hand. And she's a paraplegic. She's always educated me in a way that I believe we can use art as therapy. And I think for her, that kind of worked through her rehabilitation, say, as part of healing. So then with that, I've always been quite open-minded to the fact that art can heal and the successes it brings. And that's when I decided to expand on my creativity and start doing things like photography-based workshops and, you know, even charging friends and family and neighbours for little portrait shoots and things. So yeah, My dad suffered with a lot of addiction throughout his life. So again, I think that stemmed from a lot of creative healing in terms of looking into the research behind, obviously, the work that I've got involved in since I studied with the USEN, and I would totally recommend the programme. If anything, it's moulded me as an artist.
And it kind of really encouraged you to volunteer at charities during your studies, didn't it, Chanel?
Yeah,
100%. A bit more about the people that you worked with.
Sure, 100%. I think the course, it encouraged me to kind of move forward with my work and find myself as an artist. So that's when I kind of, I was in talks with a really, really useful group called the Calico Enterprise Group, and the guys down there from Acorn Recovery at Bad Camera. They seemed to, they got on board with the idea that I wanted to use photography as therapy, and they seemed to use different types of mixed media then to engage with people from all fringes of life and different backgrounds. And they kind of use media as a tool for them to express their stories. And I think that is really important because, you know, art in itself is a very expressive medium. And I think if we've got that and people can relate to that, whether they suffer from not being able to communicate through whatever means of trauma or addiction related purposes, I think, or even for people who find it hard to express themselves, I think art is therefore a really beneficial outlet.
Well, that must have been really difficult during lockdown, because I imagine in the first instance you wanted to use a camera with everyone. You wanted to give everyone cameras and they could take their own photographs. But then lockdown hit, and you did a call out, really, didn't you, for client images? So you could use those images as part of photo montage and different types of collage.
That's correct, yeah. I think what with the lockdown approaching, I had talks with Andrew and I on how we were going to get this work, you know, over the final hurdles and actually have a finished piece. So the pressure was on, which I'm not complaining. If anything, it gave me that kind of that third wheel to get things moving. And that's when I started looking into sourcing some current research from the Department of Counselling there at the college. And I was in talks with Dr. Snell, and he allowed me to come and sit and participate in some of his counselling sessions, which was brilliant, because I had a lot of observational kind of strategies, and then people were just inundated with, you know, they wanted to get involved. And I think that's really important for people to be able to participate and want to volunteer. There's one thing observing and taking kind of a lot of research from that, but then I think if they recognise that they want to be part of this, it's halfway there to recovery for me, I believe. So yeah, again, it falls into the research of I think the therapy of change as well is a big part of my work, because I feel if people are then able to become, they then feel like they can belong. And again, it's great to be able to express that through my work, which I've gone on to do, really.
Well, they're very expressive, the photographs that you've produced for First Light. They're really beautiful, they're very relatable. And what's interesting about them is this kind of use of cut-ups and lines and fractures as a representation of the addict's life. But I don't know anything about addiction. My dad was an alcoholic when I was a kid, and I had a very simplistic view of that. But I think your images are very, very relatable, and they have a universal kind of statement. They have something to say about chaos and broken connections, and how difficult it is really to talk to people closest to you, right? And I'd just like to bring in Eleanor at this point. Congratulations again to you, Eleanor, too, on a lockdown graduation.
Thank you.
Very weird period to graduate. And just paired with this first like commission, you wrote about isolation relations during a particularly difficult time, didn't you? So you were also going through a big moment in your life. You were dealing with a new diagnosis, and I'm just wondering if you could tell us all a little bit more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Shortly before my interview with Chanel, I had a diagnosis of autism at the age of 26. And even though I already knew this about myself for a couple of years, hearing it confirmed, it was surprisingly still a lot to process. I was learning that my life may never look like the way I imagined or I hoped it would. I was told that I needed to adjust my expectations. And knowing that things are always going to be a challenge for me and there's no like fixing it, there's just adapting. I was also very sad, almost like grieving for this life that I might have had if I'd had this information when I was younger and had support, or even a life where I just didn't have autism. Like maybe like I would like my life would have had a lot less struggle and suffering, and like things like maybe I wouldn't have dropped out of college at 16 and spent year age succeed and have a normal life, or have normal experiences, while I was sort of left behind and struggling to just exist, really. And I had no idea why that was. So I spent all this time just assuming that I was broken. I felt like this faulty little machine, with like no instruction manual, which is kind of sort of where my interest in technology sort of came from, I guess.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because I really felt that in the text as well. I think reading a test card portrait that you've written for Chanel and this upcoming publication that'll come out in May, I thought it was a really careful, studied portrait of what it might mean to feel broken or to be broken. And not just that, but there's a line, glitches don't necessarily make us broken, and there's hope in the text as well as being very cleverly around techniques and processes that we're not all familiar with. I mean, you're an artist, you're a trained artist, so you articulate technology in the text very, very well and clearly, I thought. But it's a very expressive text, and just as Chanel's telling us there about her photography being an expressive outlet, I wonder how you found the writing of this text as a different kind of expression to making sculptures.
Yeah, is very different. I guess I feel like I have a bit more of a voice with writing. Also, able to just sort of write down everything that I was feeling. Like when I was writing this text, it was like I was trying to process all of this that I was feeling, and sort of through that, trying to sort of tell myself like my glitches, my neurodivergence doesn't make me broken. I just function a little differently, and now that I can see that, I can like learn to adjust the settings. Yeah, it was a lot like therapy for me. in the same way that yeah, it would be for the people that Chanel had worked with in the photographs.
It's a really beautiful way of putting it. Thank you. I think that's a good moment also to bring in Andrew. So as Chanel's tutor, you nominated her, of course, for the First Light programme. Thanks for doing that.
No problem.
I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about this use of the glitch in photography and in writing, particularly as these two have used it as a tool almost to talk about tough subject matter.
Yeah, I think the glitch itself, first of all, is a really interesting artistic tool, which kind of defines the age of when the work is made almost as well, I think, because there's constantly been this idea that a photograph can sell 1,000 words, which I've never particularly believed, and I've always felt that the use of text or some other kind of intervention on the image helps to convey the message within the story. And I think that Chanel's work and also the writing of Eleanor does this completely. And if we think about how Chanel, for example, has used the glitch as an intervention of the subject's own family album snapshots to reveal those kind of flaws and cracks and the general kind of chaos of what an addict's family, not only the addict themselves, but also the wider family and social group were also experiencing. You know, and if we think about how a glitch works and the erratic nature of it almost, and we look at it aesthetically, and we can almost use this to interpret how the lives of a recovering addict can almost affect the family members, as well as a person who's suffering from addiction themselves. And I think if we look at the images, which we can see behind us, and we can see how these mistakes are almost a way to represent the mistakes that the individual may have made in their past. So, yeah.
I wonder, Andrew, how just thinking about the vulnerable subjects and the sensitive subject matter, I wonder as a lecturer in ethics, as much as anything else, how you work with students at UCEN to really work with socially engaged photography in a good way, and you know, what's your best practice really? What are your tips and advice for approaching that?
Okay, initially I should point out that when the project began, it was completely different, and Chanel was looking at almost an art therapy project in working in collaboration with the participation of sufferers who were having a hard time in dealing with their own addictions. And the research was fantastic, by the way. She was going to counselling groups that we had at UCEN Manchester, and she was able to participate in these groups. I was always slightly concerned, just going to the ethics of this, because I think it's quite easy to subjectify participants of a project, even if they're there of their own accord and they're willing to participate in the project. Those people in those kind of situations are not always the best place to advise themselves on what might be the right thing to do, which is where I kind of see our job as a tutorial team to take care of that stuff and find a way that the participant has a voice, has a platform to tell their own story in a way that is suitable for their own circumstances. And I actually think in that case, because it's what happened was obviously, and she was working in this way, and lockdown kicked in, which meant she no longer had access to participate in these groups. And so she moved the project away from that and instead asked for the participants to send in family album images, which I think was a great move all round. It took the dangerous stuff that I've just been talking about away and enabled her to maybe show this in a more sympathetic way almost.
Yeah, that's I mean, I don't know whether we should thank lockdown for that, but certainly having to adapt at the moment to new presentation methods, right? And also just communicating as a student with your tutorial team. It's very, very difficult. Never mind trying to work with the general public, with charities. So I wonder also then how this text intervention, Andrew, in your view, what that's added to
I think
Chanel's work.
it was fascinating for me to read the text, and what was great was that lots of things that Eleanor had wrote were kind of in my mind as well. This idea of the corruption of data, and it was interesting hearing Eleanor kind of related to her own circumstances and her own experiences that she's going through as well. And this idea that if a bug was in the physical world and not the digital one, what would that almost be, and how would it look? And I'd be interested in hearing Eleanor's kind of take on that, particularly after the beautiful text that she's wrote, that we think of software is almost like a brain, and the same way that the software is being hacked within the imagery is almost exactly the same way that the brain is being hacked by the effects of addiction. I mean, it's just a way of demonstrating how an addict's brain is being hacked by a substance which has corrupted it. And just kind of thinking about the use of the glitch to warp to some kind of degree, what we actually see in the work is maybe what the addict is kind of experiencing in the physical world. And I'd be interested to hear kind of what Eleanor thinks about that stuff, that idea of shifting and migrating those kind of memories and information being broken. If you could tell us a little bit about that stuff, Eleanor, that would be awesome, that you wrote in the text. I mean, there's some beautiful pieces where you talk about exposing faults in the receiver, for example, which I think is a really beautiful way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I feel like Chanel's work materializes the issues that were hidden beneath the surface. So yeah, I think I liked how I don't know, like the glitches to me represented like a story, like a combination of just like everything that has happened to a person, and also yes, the corruption that has happened from addiction and the effect on the brain, which I thought was definitely another interesting angle. But also everything outside of that, like and
maybe that idea of how, like, it's almost in the work itself, it's almost exposing those faults in the receiver, be it our brain or be it the software or whatever it might be. I think I mean, I just love that text that you wrote there. I'm just going to quote you, if you don't mind, Eleanor. A graphic specially engineered to assist with the calibration of a television picture by exposing faults in the receiver. And I think that's a really key theme in this. It's Chanel's work has exposed those faults in the receiver, be that our brain, be it the software that we use in imagery, be it this way of working online. And I just think that you've absolutely nailed what the work is about. And I think the writing and the images go together perfectly. I think you two were a perfect fit almost to
oh, thank you.
I think so too.
Across. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like with everything must come to the surface with therapy, and in order to heal and move forward, I think that's what Chanel's work does. It brings to the surface everything that's happened, all the pain, and just lays it out in this beautiful rainbow, different colors and shapes, Yeah, there was actually thing that really struck me about her work and sort of got me on this path. Was said that she saw rainbows in the glitches and that they were this beacon of hope, which is something that really struck me. Because I was looking at it quite negatively before, and then she explained it's actually about healing and then taking something really beautiful from something painful. And yeah.
I think I'd like to put that back to Chanel in terms of presentation, because I think that's really interesting. Like, obviously this is why we get together, right? This is why artists and critics and writers all get together and talk, because these different perspectives come out of the work. But having only seen your work, Chanel, online, I'm really looking forward to seeing it physically in a gallery space in May. And I just wonder how you're planning to present the work to the public.
Yeah, so again, just addressing the exhibition, I've been in talks with a curator, Mario, down at the centre, and he's been really understanding, in the sense that I could have went left field with it, I could have went, one other way with it. And I suppose for me, it was about injecting that kind of the sense of how addiction can affect families. And it was a big part of my images to start with. And then you've got the sense of the addiction. Addiction is a brain disease. So I wanted to try and show the corruption of that within the images through the process of the motherboard of the computer, say, as opposed to the brain, the human brain. Then you've got the files representing DNA. You've got all these different types of software that I used, all the different techniques. And don't get me wrong, there was lots of images to choose from, and there was lots of different techniques. And I wouldn't like to say there were errors. There weren't errors. If anything, there were beautiful parts that represented each and every individual that participated, i.e. everyone's different. So then when you see this kind of collaborative mashup of technology, and you've got the different types of colours and things, I see that as a way of, again, representing, giving art a platform as art as therapy, and how it can help, in a beautiful way. So yeah, I've been looking at Family Album, and do you know how you get these gallery positions of the way certain types of family culture hang images, and they have them displayed around the home? So I kind of ran with the idea of having this aesthetic value of incorporating the home within the exhibition. So I'm looking at having talks with a company that provide white furniture. So I wanted this kind of homely environment, but everything was very clinical and stark white. So you still get that sense of a representation of the average home. And then the work would then be displayed in like a gallery hung format. So it kind of represents the family album or even what goes on behind closed doors. But then the work would pop.
Sorry to interrupt you now. Are you talking about like a Victorian hang? So you'll have lots of different photographs from all over the walls, like from... Yeah. Well, yeah, kind of. We're in talks at the moment of sizes. So we're going from anything from A3. And there's going to be, from the series I've produced of 20 images, we're teetering on a collection of 8. So they'll be arranged in like an Irving Penn kind of style corner, just to give you that sense of, again, a family gathering, a front room setting. And I'm hoping that, fingers crossed, the public can congregate in that area, creating some kind of, footfall, talks from different companies, and they can all teeter on the idea of addiction and family and mental health and well-being and stuff. And yeah. So you're hoping to create a space for discussion actually within... Yeah, that's correct. In Warrington. And it's important to point out the exhibition is going to be in a shop front. So Castlefield New Art Spaces, repurpose new public spaces. So it'll be in the centre of Warrington. There'll be loads of people walking past doing the shopping. And this really beautiful and thoughtful idea of creating a space where people can come together and talk about their mental health or addiction or family experiences. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. It's all about using art as a sense of recovery, which is a massive milestone when it comes to families who are battling with addiction and individuals, because as you know, addiction can kind of teeter with the whole aesthetic of a family network. So that's what I've tried to show through my work as well.
Well, we've all read the stats, haven't we, about how art is very good for us, it's good for our well-being, our mental health, our experiences release chemicals in our brain, and much the same as going to the cinema or going to a gig, and it makes us happy. But I think the reality of seeing art, obviously at the moment during lockdown, it's completely impossible. But also in places like Warrington, where the high street's in decline, and having these kind of non-gallery spaces, I think, is really, really important, isn't it? To not only get your very new work out there as a graduate, but also just get art into the streets.
Yeah, definitely.
People don't normally have access to loads and loads of contemporary art spaces, which might be the normal kind of avenue for showcasing your work, right?
That's interesting, Laura. Yeah, again, people they kind of have this misconception of these kind of very stark white cubist spaces and galleries and things. Have always had like a bit of stick that the upper classes were only allowed access to these places. But again, I think moving forward, we've been given platforms such as social media and things where people can feel they can represent themselves and express themselves in a way that is creative. But then I'd like to give a nod to things like analog and photography as a mechanism of transition, so that's where I come in.
Absolutely.
And kind of rebel against the norm and hacking things and glitching things and kind of doing unconventional stuff with art, because that's what it's about. It's about expressionism and tapping into different types of again, relational aesthetics. So it's for everyone, even if you haven't got a voice or been able to be heard, I suppose.
I wonder what Andrew thinks about this as a tutor and as an artist, having to navigate this horrendous time in higher education. And how have the students been coping with this, Andrew, and how are they adapting?
Oh, okay. I'm just dead quickly going to go back to something that we just said, though, that I think is really interesting. Because Eleanor kind of talked about this idea of bringing the work to the surface, and what you guys quite rightly were talking about then is having the work displayed in public spaces, which I also think is really important. After working in galleries myself over the years, however hard we tried to get more diverse cultures and demographics into a gallery space, it never seems to happen, because and we think of a gallery and we think about how they even look and how imposing those buildings often are, with a big high bank of steps and Athenaeum columns and all the rest of it. And so I think it's important to think about where we actually show the work, but also I think, and something we've not really spoke about, is the kind of work that we make as well. And I think part of the problem which sometimes makes it inaccessible is really good conceptual work can sometimes be too conceptual or too inaccessible. So the general public, those people who you want to be talking about the work, just think it's not for them there, because they think, well, I'm not going to go into a gallery because I'm not going to understand how the work's being made, and I'm just not going to get it, and then I'm going to feel daft. What I think that the work of Chanel has done really well here is it makes it accessible, and we look at the work and we can kind of get it, and maybe with the aid of a piece of text, such as the writing of Eleanor particularly. But I think it's been made in a really democratic way, which makes it easy to understand. The concept is still there, it's massively there, but it's easy to read at the same time. And I just wanted to pick up on that, because I think that's a really important point. It's not only the spaces, it's sometimes the way that we make work as well. In answer to your question, yeah, look, I mean, I'm not going to lie, I think it's been incredibly tough for everybody working in this way. I was speaking to some students about this yesterday. I'm actually, I'm going to a film screening, an online version this afternoon of some of the work that the students have made purely online. And even though it's been really difficult and there's a lot of negatives around it, I also think it should be noted there's a lot of optimism as well, and students have kind of made work in a more artistic approach almost. I mean, I'm actually working as well as photography students with a lot of the students within the institution who were working in film, and they would traditionally be part of a film crew of 8 or 10 or 15 people. And all of a sudden, they've not been able to make work because they're not on campus, and they've been forced into making work in a more individual way, which is the stuff we're going to be looking at this afternoon. And so I think there's a lot of positives as well, and people have had to adapt. And Chanel's, the actual project itself is a really good example of that. It obviously started off in the physical world. It was going to be almost like a community-based project, and it became an online project. And so I think there's a lot of positives to be taken. And I'm sure that once the lockdown is over and we return to some degree of normality, there probably are quite a lot of aspects that we will take from this way of working forward. And so I think it's important to identify that there's good stuff as well as the stuff that hasn't been so great.
Yeah, you're right there, Andrew. Thanks for mentioning that. I'd just like to point out that I've also got some commission pieces coming up ahead of being noticed, through all this as well. And that's really positive moving forward. Just to, again, put the message out there that art is just as good as, therapy. So, yeah, watch this space.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, at the end of the day as well, Chanel, you've made an absolutely awesome project, which it could be argued may not have happened if it wasn't for the situation. So, and all credit to you for the way that you've kind of thought outside the box, that idea of artistic blue sky thinking, or whatever it's called.
Pressure, the Moseley pressure, Moseley Gate, we called it. Thanks, guys, honestly.
Yeah.
And Ellen is a former student of mine from the University of Salford, and I've been so impressed by how you've adapted your interest in writing and in video and film historically to Chanel's work, with this attention to detail, this consideration and generosity. So I've been so impressed by you, Eleanor, so thank you so much for taking part in First Light.
Thank you.
And going out of your comfort zone as a BA Fine Arts student, as I am, and now a writer. So it just shows how skilled our graduates are now.
Very. Thanks, guys.
We need to celebrate that and support it going forward. Yeah. So I think that's a good place to pause discussion, because Eleanor will be treating us to a live reading now from a test card portrait, a short text conceived and written for the First Light publication, which will be published in May. So Eleanor, when you're ready, take it away.
Peering through the blinds, bands of saturated data from a scrambled signal, a stranger's life looking back out. A girl and her teddy standing in front of noughts and crosses of altered code. A test card portrait, calibration required. Transmitted from a family album, from frames proudly displayed upon the wall, precious mementos of loved ones are taken down and fed into a machine. Once inside, the data is exposed in a raw text form. A series of alphanumeric characters representing someone's image, someone's story. Image inserted, information rewritten, cut out, copied and pasted. A memory lost in translation. The images emerging from this process are irrevocably changed and visibly blighted. Monochrome is fractured by irregular blots of colour. A digital scar is formed from the trauma. A dull, grey wasteland in the gaps where information is lost. The body is displaced across the screen. With analog television, the signal is similarly susceptible to corruption once broadcast. It could be influenced by the environment, colliding and reflecting off obstacles on its journey. splitting and diverging from its intended path. Once reaching its destination, faults in the picture appear as ghostly outlines of fragmented messages. Sometimes we get lost along the way. The route we take, our surroundings, and the obstacles that appear in front of us are altered by our decisions. But we can forge alternate pathways and learn to adapt. On arrival, the signal is translated into visual information upon the screen. Endless glowing brushstrokes glide across, left to right, top to bottom, creating dots of red, blue, and green, painting by numbers, building up line by line, dot by dot. The layers saturate the glass. Sit back, a picture is forming. A delicate balance of components work together to complete the picture. Families function in just such a way. If one part malfunctions, the system fails and the picture suffers. The relationship is strained and communication breaks down. The pixels smudge, colors bleed, shapes distort. The test card, a graphic specially engineered to assist with calibration of a television picture by exposing faults in the receiver. It once existed on the fringes of broadcasting, appearing in gaps between the programming. It was a space to reflect, to assess the damage. Every glitch is unique to each story. They are part of who we are. They might obscure our vision, making it hard to recognize ourselves or to see the complete picture. But glitches don't necessarily make us broken. The screen is on. The picture might not look the same as it once did, but there is life contained within it. The person in the photograph is still there. Bonds have changed, but might not be lost. What if the glitches are reference points for adjustment? Red, blue, and green brought to the surface where there was once only black and white. New patterns emerge if you look closer, a whole spectrum of possibility.
Beautiful. Yeah, awesome. Really well done, Eleanor.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Oh,
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Eleanor, for that fantastic reading. And thank you to my other guests, Chanel Francine and Andrew Mosley, and to Natalie Mia, OpenEye, for facilitating this talk. Shout out, of course, to Waterside Trafford and Castlefield Gallery's new art spaces too. So we'll be hosting more talks over the next few weeks with graduates from Blackpool, Liverpool John Moores, Leeds Arts and Manchester Metropolitan, amongst others, on topics including after nature and unearthly matter. So do stay tuned into OpenEye channels for those. But let's go to your questions now. Sarah Fisher from OpenEye is really interested in whether Chanel felt Eleanor's writing helped to reveal things she had been thinking about in the photographs. What do you think, Chanel?
Sorry, Laura, can you just repeat that?
Yeah, sure. Do you think that Eleanor's writing helped to reveal things that you'd been thinking about in the photographs already?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, Eleanor and I worked in unison. She's like, you know, she read my mind. If not, you know, actions speak louder than words, or in Eleanor's case, her words speak louder than actions. So she did it justice. I usually have more to say, but I'm blown away because it was so beautiful, honestly. In fact, Andrew made a point of images needing text, or some people might have a different opinion on that. But in this case, I think if you weren't to have seen the images and you were to have heard that piece, who knows? Who knows?
You're totally right. I'm blown away as well. And I've heard Eleanor read that a few times now, and it gets better. It gets better with every read and every listen. Yeah. So thank you so much, Eleanor. I'll put the same question to you from Sarah Fisher. So did you feel like talking to Chanel developed your writing?
Yeah. So I guess I went in with a very sort of set idea of what to do with the writing. But then and ended up like asking her quite what's the word, like narrow questions. But then it's like lucky for me that Chanel just managed to expand on those questions and give me like so much information. It was and taught I don't know, but yeah, yeah, it was from like certain things that she said that actually, when talking to her, that actually inspired the text, like the way she talked about glitches, because it was very positive, the message that she wanted to put out there and like what she wanted to do with her work, and I really loved that and wanted to like write about that.
Thank you, Eleanor. It really comes across that you love the work, and I think that's what's so beautiful about this project. All the parents so far, there's a lot of respect and care and generosity within the parents, between writer and photographer, between artist writer, between writer photographer. You know, you all have these skills between you, and you've been able to communicate in a very mature, beautiful way. We've got a question here for you from Jenny Berry. Chanel.
Oh, hey, Jenny.
Chanel, I adore your work. What advice would you give an addict wanting to express themselves but unaware of how to begin? A really excellent question.
Okay. Well, at the moment, I'm studying a little something called psychographics. So, yeah. Anyway, we should be doing a collab on this. Jenny's actually a really renowned poet. She's brilliant, guys. Go and check out her work, Jenny Berry. And I've had the pleasure of working alongside Jenny, only on a small project, but yeah, again, watch this space. So, interesting question, Jen. I think my advice would be to, again, it's about self-reflection. And I think if you can admit and kind of, you know, want to move forward creatively, or just want to be able to express yourself openly, you're halfway there to recovery. So I think it's all about the recovery process, and us as artists to try and make the experience as much about us opening up about who we are and our intentions in order to gain some kind of insight into the addict's life. So I think that's a good place to start.
Thank you, Chanel. We've got a question from Mike Pennington for Eleanor. How did you come up with the test card idea?
So the first image I was sent of Chanel's reminded me, it's this image, reminded me of test card F with the girl and the clown and the chalkboard, like visually. So I like this idea that the glitches could be used as a useful tool in the recovery process. You can see what went wrong, you can learn from it and try to adjust. And there's also a lot of other reasons why the TV worked as an idea. There's sorry, I've written I looked at how I looked at how an image reaches the TV screen and how the faults in the picture might form in this process. I liked how this reflects how messages are sent in the brain and can be manipulated or corrupted by outside influences with addiction. But I also looked at how the brain can change its pathways and adapt. And I then looked at how the family plays into this too, with them being the parts inside the TV, working as one to display the image. And also I remember Chanel telling me about her idea for the exhibition and that she wanted a domestic setup. And the TV is a really great link as you think of it as a focal point in the living room. It's part of a family ritual. You all gather around to watch something at a certain time. And then also the contrast of writing about the analog TV alongside the digital images and the digital processes that Chanel used in her work. Yeah, I think.
You've obviously done tons of research, so you're a professional writer already.
I looked at loads of old diagrams and TV manuals. It's very fun.
It comes across in the writing for sure, Eleanor. I'm going to dive in with another question. We've got tons to get through. Mario Popham, First Light curator. Chanel, he wants to know how the finished project was received by the individuals and families who participated. Another great question.
Yeah, great question, Mario. Unfortunately, I've not had much feedback due to the ethics. Obviously, you can imagine. But again, I'm hoping that this moving forward will create a wider platform and give some kind of voice moving forward. And I've also got work coming up, so it all has a knock-on effect as well. Yeah, and I think it's quite current, it's quite fitting, as my boss would say. It's the is it zeitgeist? So it's quite you know, with this current time with the pandemic and whatnot and things, and mental health and well-being on the current rise, it's, you know, you only have to hear one thing and it's all around, and we're hearing it all the more. And then education has been a big part of this kind of whole you know, how do you put it? It's like on the forefront of what's needed. So again, it's all about educating people for the better and for the great of all these charities and community and things through art, which I think is very much needed.
It's not, it doesn't sound like it's a finished project at all. Chanel, sounds like it's an ongoing one. You still got loads more work to do and research into that. I would love to ask Andrew more about the program that he's developed at USEN with Open Eye Gallery, because that's really super unusual and yeah, pretty exciting. Andrew, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, yeah, I'll be pleased to. I'd rather use the word unique rather than unusual, because I do believe it's a really unique offer that we've currently got. So we've got a brand new BA with an honours degree programme, which starts in September of this year, and there are still places available for anybody who wishes to apply or to find out more. You can actually go to the Open Eye website, and there's a tab there that says study with us, I think, or the course. If you click on there, and there's lots of details around it, but the course is titled Photography and Social Practice. I had the opportunity to write a new degree program a couple of years ago, and something that I really wanted to do was to create what I felt was a unique offer by really involving industry. I think education is tough, particularly at the moment, and education, it's quite often that courses and even people who teach on the courses, because of the demands of being in education, means that we're not able to work in industry as much as we may have done previously, or we would certainly like. I know that is something that probably many lecturers will kind of recognise as well. So the idea always was to find that somewhere else, and the Open Eye is obviously a gallery which I was aware of. I've always been a big admirer of the Open Eye, and I thought, how cool would it be to write a programme in direct collaboration and an absolute partnership with the Open Eye itself. As we were writing the programme, we were really fortunate that it was at the same time that the Open Eye appointed a new curator in Maria Atta, who's been absolutely instrumental in writing many of the units. It covers socially engaged practice, everything that you could possibly hope, or the kind of degree program that I would love to go on myself is covered in this course. And I can't thank the guys at the Open Eye, particularly Sarah, for giving us this opportunity to work together, and Mariama as well, for being so instrumental in the course program and writing units. She's probably wrote around a third of the course. So it's been awesome, and I'm really excited to get going in September. As I say, there's more information and details about it on the OpenEye site itself. Also, and you can go to USEM Manchester website and find details there. And it's also live and direct on the UCAS website too.
You've basically written your dream course, Andrew, and made it a reality.
No, I mean, I consider myself really fortunate. It's been a fantastic opportunity and something that I've absolutely grabbed with both hands. And yeah, I'm super excited of what we can offer the students come September.
Well, if Chanel's any marker of quality of the students that are coming out of your department, then, you know, huge congratulations. I think we should leave the last word with Chanel. We've had lots of questions. We can't answer them all, as I've said, but we did have a question about glitch software. So William Plews asked, did you use glitch software directly or alter data yourself in the software to get the result that you wanted?
Sure, William, good question. So it was a mix of both, really. What I did was, again, with all the research behind the brain disease of addiction, I kind of then used my computer as the mother brain, and then obviously taking it from there. So the one of the programs was TextEdit, which is quite simple, and it was a case of kind of like extracting or manipulating some of the digits, because it's made up of binary, so it's all coding. And just like DNA, if you were to just alter 1, 2, even 3 elements of that, what happens then is it changes slightly, or in some cases immensely, the outcome. And it's funny because each image, I received JPEGs, TIFFs, GIFs, and again, like us as people, we're all different, made up of different data, and each image therefore had its different representation of a glitch, which was again beautiful. You know, I'd love to be able to show the full series. So who knows? Who knows what format it'll come in? But yeah, it was amazing. And I know there's loads of software out there, and there's loads of stuff I've been looking at. I've been looking at using Audacity, which again is audio software. It's video editing software and sound. And I've been wanting to kind of tap into using voiceovers or even text, and reading parts of text and converting that into some kind of sound wave or image. So yeah, it's big.
Sound would be exciting, wouldn't it?
Sound would be exciting, yeah.
See this because you've literally showcasing the work in May in the First Light exhibition, so that's something I'm really looking forward to, and we can all have a glass of something alcoholic
yeah,
launch. And it's free and everyone's welcome, and there'll be more details about that exhibition, that First Light exhibition of 2020 graduates, on the OpenEye Gallery and Waterside Trafford Gallery's websites very soon. But it's 7 p.m. past, so I'm going to have to let you go. Thank you so much to all my guests again, and thank you for all the fantastic questions that all the attendees
thank you, great question
tonight. We really appreciate you giving up your evening and joining us for this. We don't take it for granted, so thank you all, and have a lovely Easter, and we'll see you again soon for the next First Light Spotlight. Thank you, everybody.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.